and welcome to the May safety training, which is being done entirely virtually. There are two presentations for me, and there's an additional presentation for Danny with summarization, so I'll go ahead and dive right on into it. The starting one is the first aid. Some principal basics for first aid is survey the scene. Check it out. I think one time we had on the presentation of a video training we did that it said, watch. You see that somebody laying on the floor? Stop. There might be electricity running through some water on the floor, anything like that. So you survey the situation, make sure there are no real hazards, and then access it and assess what has occurred. Stop the action causing the injury. Cool down burns or do whatever you can, little things. Then, or right at that time, report it using 911. Let the control room know, let them make the call. Avoid grooming the person because this person may have a broken neck or something like that. And at that point, you just want to keep them isolated, minimize the movement to avoid any other complications, and then proceed with the appropriate action. At that point, pretty much wait for the EMS to arrive and they'll take care of business. Surveying the scene, first step. Look for electrical hazards, like I mentioned. Chemical hazards, check that out. Any kind of fumes or gases, that might be another issue. Ground hazards, make sure for that. Fire should be pretty obvious. And any unstable equipment, something that's hanging precariously or whatever, just look for it. Of course, there's the safety chain, which is early access, early CPR, early defib, and early advanced care. So basically, we do this, and we do this. We make the phone call, or we're doing CPR or any other first aid that's required. Universal actions. Treat for shock, make the victim comfortable, keep the victim warm, keep the victim's head level with the body. Don't allow unconscious, semi-conscious persons to eat or drink. Just kind of wet their lips if they're saying they're thirsty. I believe the thing here is we give them some food and they're semi-conscious, they might choke. Avoid letting the victim see any of the wounds. And keep bystanders and onlookers at a good distance and apply direct pressure to bleeding wounds. Doing all these steps are simple interim steps that we can do before EMS arrives. Burns, when they occur. First, cool down the burn area. So first, when you have this burn, the first thing to do is to cool down the burned area. Treat if possible supplies that we have in medicine cabinets, and then follow other general procedures. Specifically, if it's a more serious wound, burn, we may be able to take that person to a hospital ourselves, depending on the situation. If it's a hand wound like that, we can drive them. Universal precautions for airborne and bloodborne pathogens. We always talk about bloodborne pathogens. HIV, the AIDS precursor, or hepatitis B. Of course, now we're thinking also the Wuhan flu, aka the coronavirus. That's another thing. So after any kind of treatment, make sure you clean up everything around there, clean up the immediate vicinity, and dispose of any dressings, bandages, wash your hands in soap and water. And in the case of any kind of flu issues, make sure you have a mask. First aid kits, of course. An adequate number of kits shall be kept on site. We've done that. We have some in the admin building. We have some over the shop. It is expected that any incident that requires use of first aid supplies be reported immediately and at least before the end of the shift. Having said that, if you decide, hey, I'm going to get an aspirin because I have a headache, I think that's not what we're talking about. But if we have a situation where a person is gashed their arm, whatever, let me go ahead and bandage it up, report it. AED usage shall be maintained as per manufacturer's recommendations. We're working on that with the help of James and Brad. The AED would be brought to all medical emergencies. It should be used on any person who displays the symptoms of cardiac arrest. And the AED would be placed only after the following symptoms have been confirmed. The victim has no pulse or shows no sign of circulation. The victim is unconscious. The victim is not breathing. When you apply those pads, keep in mind that machine does its own evaluation. And if the person's okay, it will not apply a shock. Medical emergencies. All injuries must be reported to your boss. First aid CPR trained personnel will be called to respond to any minor aid of first aid injuries. Keeping this in mind, we are due this year to do our renewal for this. That's going to be delayed because of the pandemic measures that are in place right now. If applicable, the injured person will be taken to the plant's approved medical care facility for further emergency room treatment or evaluation, kind of like a burn to a hand. All right. At this point, you would take a quiz. And then start after that. Now, I was at my friend's ranch, which is north of Boston, and I came across this. And some of you can probably see it. It's very colorful. But let me go ahead and help you out here. It's not a very long video. Apologize for the shaking. What is that? One of the things I can tell you right off the bat is that it's venomous and also it's pretty fast. Now, these things are about 2 to 3 feet long, and they generally want to avoid me. And they have a small head, you can see it. Very small head. So this is a coral snake, and one of the ways you can tell it's a coral snake and not an imposter, watch it's fast. You'll get on the concrete here and you can see it. It's actually kind of a beautiful snake. Red touches yellow, kills a fellow. This had yellow bands interspersed with red and black. There is a imposter, a copycat that doesn't have it. So red touches yellow. Look for that. Now, this was here in Texas, and it just so happens that there is a Texas coral snake. The venom is a strong neurotoxin. I did point out to you the head. The head is small. It is hard for these snakes to bite a person. They've, based on what I could find, we've had a death in 2006, and one in the 80s and one in the 90s. So it's not a very frequent issue as far as pain or whatever, but they're out there. All right. Moving to the second, more appropriate now that the temperature is rising, heat stress. Manifestations. We have heat fatigue, rashes, cramps, collapse, exhaustion, stroke. A little bit of overlap here, but all of these are related to the fact we're getting too much heat. The body is warming up too much. One of the factors for heat fatigue is the fact that a person is not acclimatized. The acclimatization will occur to any person who comes to a warm climate or a cold climate. It'll take a while, but it will happen. So for instance, we have a person who comes from New York to Texas, comes from our plant from New York. They're going to need some time to adjust the heat. As a matter of fact, well, I'll show it later. Heat rash, a red rash, itching, hot, moist skin, normally slightly high body temperature. Treatment, remove from the heated area and cool down. Prevention, keep skin dry and clean, loosen the clothing, lightly salted liquids. There's kind of a little debate about that, but a little bit of salinity shouldn't hurt. And seek medical attention if the cramps persist. Heat collapse, heat exhaustion. It's a similar thing, a lot of sweating, intense thirst, fatigue, tingling in the hands and feet. And the first aid treatment, well, look over here. Cool the victim down, get them out of the heat as soon as possible. So any of these heat issues, that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to pull them away from the heat. Call 911 if the victim becomes faint or is unconscious. If they're conscious and they're suffering from some sort of cramps, we can drive them. But if it comes to this, we're going to call. Heat stroke, this one is more serious. The body temperature starts rising. Hot, red, flushed, dry skin. Skin is dry, it's not sweating. Headache, dizziness, confusion, delirium, and then it comes down to here. to seizure, loss of consciousness, and no detectable pulse. This is probably the most serious of the 6 that we have listed here. Treatment, once again, lower the victim's body temperature as soon as possible. Get them out of the heat situation and cool them down. Don't give liquids to unconscious victims. I guess once again, we're worried about choking. And other tips for controlling heat stress, these are more like preventative. Allow your body to become acclimatized to your surroundings. Follow a schedule of work-rest cycles, which I'll show in the next slide or 2. And drink about 8 ounces of fluid every 15 minutes. Doesn't have to be that kind of schedule, but allow yourself the freedom to go ahead and drink more frequently. To say it's okay, the weather's hot outside, this is why I'm thirsty. It says talk about a light, cool lunch instead of hot, heavy meals. You can make your own determination based on that. Climatization. It's a slide when I was talking about a person moving from a cool state to a warm state like ours. Almost half of the reported cases of heat illness occur on the first day of the job. Another 80% occur within the first week. And the human body can adapt, so it does adapt, but it does take some time for that to happen. And the worker will sweat more efficiently, and this will be more easily able to maintain normal body temperatures. It's an adjustment. Fluid replacement, ideally you want cool water. We have some cold water, but the cold water, the water dispensers are typically at a good temperature for this. Should be made available for work. Now it says here, except caffeinated and alcoholic beverages. You're getting a cold one, the caffeine or the alcohol will also be working against your idea of cooling off. It's kind of a battle going on there. Once again, don't hesitate to drink water. Ample supplies of liquids should be placed close to the work area. And I know we always have that. We bend Cody's ear a little bit, we bend other people's ears, we need something. Don't stop doing that. When you feel there's a need, let us know. This is another one. This is these temperatures, when you look at 86 degrees, or I think that's about 89 degrees, those are not very high temperatures, but that's actually wet bulb temperature. It's a special version of this. I can tell you that this is typically more going to be related to the mid-upper 90s. Notice this. When it's moderately hot, 75% work, 25% rest. You start working when it's hot outside, and it'll get hot, we know this. Suddenly you're going 25% work outside and 75% rest. There was a situation on Fort Hood. I don't know if it's still the case, but they would have a heat alert. If the temperature got to 95 degrees and the humidity was at 75 degrees, they would shut down all outdoor activities. So that would be another guide. You see that happening. A hot day, a humid day, take a break. And in summary, there's like a number of manifestations. Of course, the biggest one to worry about is heat stroke, but all of them require us to get the person out of the heat and cool them down. Susceptibility varies, so as we acclimatize, we get more tolerant to this. And identification and control. We try engineering controls to keep the heat from affecting us. Acclimatization helps. There's some work practice we'll work at, but there's also heat stress training, which we're doing right now, and adequate shade and fluid replacement, which is a constant effort. All right, that is the conclusion of my trainings. There is one for summarization that comes next. That will be for Danny.
All right, this is the annual training for the hot weather portion of the emergency response plan, which is the ERP 008. The plan requires, of course, the annual training. Also provides guidance on how to prepare for and prevent summer seasonal operational problems caused by extreme weather, extreme hot weather. The policy includes the inspection and verifying that the HVAC circuits are operational, That is done prior, probably was just done. The inspection of the cooling tower, which is done during the outages. This includes blade pitch checks, field drift eliminators, distribution piping checks. Of course, you all know that we had some pluggage in the distribution piping, and I think the next outage we're going to go in and look a little more into the smaller piping. Of course, the motor alignments on the cooling tower fans, the basin and pump bay inspections, and structural timbers and anchor checks. Inspect building supplies and exhaust fans, the DCS cabinets, cooling mechanisms, the fans and the filters in there. We do have a PM, I think a quarterly or a semi-annual PM there. Identify temporary cooling requirements, which could be portable AC unit, which we have back in the back room, or could be simply putting a water hose over a exchange heater that is not working very well. Of course, monitoring all coolers for proper operation and monitoring the closed cooling water heat exchanger for proper operation. Continuing with this, temporary cooling protection is to be identified by plant personnel. So if you know of any issues that we have, we need to bring that up to get that either corrected or at least mitigated with some temporary cooling. Check sheet should be completed annually, normally done by Byron. Of course, with the current situation of the corona, I may get one of the production leaders to do this. And work orders that are identified or problems that are identified, work orders need to be issued for the correct the deficiencies and target completion date of 30 days from the date of issue. Implementation, the annual implementation should be scheduled around the second quarter of each year. Activities are to include completing the hot weather active action items by May 31st, completing revision of check sheet by mid-June, and communicating the hot weather plan responsibilities by mid-May, and completing the hot weather check sheet verification by mid-May, and also the training, which is what we are doing here. Communication and implementation of summer weather advisories. So anytime that that ERCOT issues an advisory, the person in the control room should make a note in the book about the advisory, the time, and that it was issued. And then, of course, they have to fill out the check sheet, which will come up in another slide here. And then once that summer advisory is released, we need to make a note in the book for that. It is a auditable item, so we need to make good notes in the control room log sheet for that. And of course, the sheet should be turned back into me and put on my door. So, of course, implement operating controls during the extreme weather. Complete hot weather check sheet immediately following that summer advisory. Assure adequate staff for readiness of implementation. Summer heat, we've never had people out here like we do for the winter, but if that was needed, we would get extra people. And impose restrictions on maintenance activities during this advisory, so you put your hands in your pockets. And then communicate the end of the hot weather plan implementation to the facility personnel at the end of the summer. So here's the check sheet. So once the ERCOT issues the advisory, we complete this check sheet. Basically, it is checking the DCS control cabinets, cooling fans, the ovation drops, and all the air conditioners, whether it be on the PDCs, SIMS units, out to clarifier, of course the EX2000 buildings, and all the PECs and the switch yards. So, and also checking the heat exchanger to make sure that they're adequate cooling. So the very first part of this is the blade pitches. We do this during outage, and it is just a once a year check. And that is pretty much it. So the hot weather check sheet should be prepared for the areas, including on these areas are the gas turbines, the HRSGs, compressor areas, generator areas, water treatment, and auxiliary equipment skids. So with that, that ends this portion of your training. If you have any questions, please get with myself, Kelly, or Zane. Thank you.